Hey YouTube, Twig here, bringing you all an update to my Infernoid Yugioh deck profile for post Battles of Legends Terminal Revenge. The Infernoid deck got a few new fusion monsters along with a new link monster. The main focus for the main deck being the new spell cards that we got to help with the overall setup of your Infernoid monsters to then use as banish options to special summon out the bigger and bigger Infernoid monsters that we run in the deck, and then having easier fusion methods to summon out some of the new cards like Infernoid Evil, and as I said, even some link summon options as well. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So we'll go ahead and start off with the main deck monsters. For the Infernoid monsters, we run 3 copies of Infernoid Decatron. If this card is normal or special summon, you can send one Infernoid monster from your deck to the graveyard, except for Infernoid Decatron. If you do, increase this card's level by the level of that set monster. If you do, that card's name becomes that monster's original name, and replace this effect with that monster's original effect. So Decatron is, as said, just the copy card of the deck, being able to set up more Infernoid monsters in your graveyard, but also give you access to that card's effects, and being one of the few Infernoid monsters that you can even summon out in the deck to begin with just a normal summon. For some of our bigger boss monster Infernoid monsters, we run 2 copies of Infernoid Anunku. It cannot be normal summon or set, must be special summon from your hand or graveyard by banishing 3 Infernoid monsters from your hand or graveyard, while the total level and ranks of all effect monsters you control are 8 or lower. When this card is special summoned, you can destroy all other monsters on the field, and once per turn, when a spell or trap or card effect is activated, quick effect, you contribute 1 monster to negate the activation and banish that card. So with Anunku being your banish option for spell and trap negation, it's one of your bigger boss monsters that you want to set up on the field as well to summon out to use against your opponent, but you really only need the 2 copies. It can be sent to the graveyard for setup with some of our other cards. So once it's there, then you just need the Infernoids to banish to be able to summon it out. And also, I have the 1 copy of Infernoid Deviati in the deck. This could also potentially be a 2 of. If you were to do so, you can drop down one of the other Infernoid monsters, like maybe Piatti, to a 1 of count to put in a 2nd copy of Deviati. It cannot be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned by banishing 3 Infernoid monsters once again from your hand or graveyard, while the total level and ranks of all effect monsters you control are 8 or lower. And when this card is special summoned, you can destroy all spell or trap cards on the field except for void cards. And once per turn, when another monster effect is activated, you contribute 1 monster to negate the activation and banish it. So while Anunku handles the spell and traps, your Deviati will handle the monster effects. And once again, if you wanted to add a 2nd copy, you can just drop down one of the other numbers for the Infernoid cards you run, like the 2 Infernoid Sijet, with the special summon restriction being you need to banish 2 Infernoid monsters from your hand or graveyard. And when this card declares an attack, you can banish 1 monster from your opponent's extra deck, their choice, and once per turn, you contribute 1 monster, then target 1 card of your opponent's graveyard, banish it. So more banish options with your Sijet, being able to take away cards from their extra deck and then also their graveyard as well using this card. The 2 copies of Infernoid Piatti. This is the one I mentioned that you can replace a 2nd copy of Deviati with another copy of this one. When it inflicts battle damage to your opponent by attacking an opponent's monster, you can send 1 random card from your opponent's hand to the graveyard. Well, a little more difficult because you do have to inflict battle damage with a 2200 attack by monster. That's why I said to reduce this card for it, and then just need to banish 2 cards to summon out this Infernoid monster as well from your hand or graveyard. So the more Infernoid monsters you set up, the better you to have for those resources. Also, the 2 copies of Infernoid Petrolea, needing 1 monster to banish for this card, and once per turn you can target a spell or trap on the field and destroy it. This card cannot attack the turn it's activated, but an easier monster, as I said, just needing 1 banish from your hand or graveyard to be able to do so. It could be the 1 of sent for your Infernoid Decatron to the graveyard for you then to make use of Petrula's special summon for it being in your hand or in the graveyard to begin with if it was sent off of Decatron. I also run the 2 copies of Infernoid Antondel, the setup in the graveyard with cards that we run in the deck to provide that setup, like with cards like Reasoning, are the reason why we run so many different monster setups to use in the deck for our Infernoids. We need 2 monsters to banish for Antondel, and also with this card, when it destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, you can activate this effect to make a 2nd attack in a row, and you contribute 1 monster, quick effect, to target 1 card to your opponent's graveyard and banish it, having the banish capabilities again, but also the attack power of a 2800 attack by monster being able to attack over again. Also running the 2 copies of Infernoid Semis, with this one needing a Banish 2, and once per turn, quick effect, having the target of a card in your opponent's graveyard to banish by attributing a monster, and also with this card, by banishing 2 Infernoid monsters from your hand or graveyard while the total levels in ranks are level 8 or lower, and at the end of the battle phase, if this card attacked an opponent's monster, you can banish 1 card on the field. So, more of a way to clear out some other pesky cards that your opponent may have in 2600, a little more easier to get over some of the cards your opponent may have to begin with. Also, the 2 copies of Infernoid Harmadic, needing 1 banish for this card as well, once per turn, being able to target a monster on the field and destroy it. So kind of like the opposite of Patrulea, and then the Tribute Banish effect as well. The 1 copy of Infernoid Permeus to finish off the main deck. No hand drops, because we do want to be able to send these cards to the graveyard with setup like Reasoning or Monster Gate. So the more and more we send, the more Infernoid cards that can be set up in the graveyard to be banished. The only problem being is when we hit the Decatron, because then that will be the card we summon out. So then we'll have all the other resources sent to the graveyard based on what we sent off of cards like Reasoning or Monster Gates. For the spells, running 3 copies of Void Imagination. Infernoid monsters you control whose original levels are 2 or higher become level 1. So this is the card that we use to be able to have multiple Infernoid monsters on the field, and all battle damage they inflict to your opponent is halved. You can send this card to the graveyard to fusion summon 1 Infernoid fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as material. If your opponent controls a monster that is special summon from the extra deck and you do not, you can also use up to 6 monsters from your extra deck as fusion material. So one of our bigger boss monsters to do for that is Infernoid Tierra, needing 1 Anunku, 1 Deviati, and 1 or more Infernoid monsters. So being able to send all those cards off of Void Imagination to then summon that monster out onto the field just gives us more and more resource setup as well in the graveyard in the form of our Infernoid monsters. I also run 3 copies of the new spell, Void Reignition. You reveal 1 Infernoid monster or 1 Void spell trap from your hand, discard your entire hand, then draw the same number of cards you discarded. If you control no monsters or all monsters you control are fiend monsters, except this card that was sent, the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target up to 11 of your banished Infernoid monsters with different names, and return them to the graveyard. You can only use this effect of Void Reignition once per duel, but it's that recycle power to get back the cards you banished to be able to reuse a good number of them, because once again, when we have Void Imagination on the field, it just helps to have more and more monsters to be able to summon out onto the field also. And also the 1 copy of the new Void Breach, a continuous spell. Infernoid monsters you control gain 100 attack for each of your banished Infernoid monsters. If you control no monsters or all monsters you control are fiend monsters, you can activate one of these effects to add 1 of your banished Infernoid monsters to your hand. Special summon 1 Infernoid monster from your hand, ignoring its summoning conditions. So this just gets around some of the restrictions that the Infernoid monsters may have, but also more of a setup for the more banished Infernoid cards you have. And I do want to run 3 copies of Void Vanishment, but I only have the 1 copy still, sadly, so I just have 2 Recurring Nightmares, more of an add-back option in the deck to use until you get Void Vanishments. You can discard 1 card to add 1 Void Spell Trap from your deck to your hand, except for Void Vanishment or Null and Void. Also, you cannot normal or special summon for the rest of this turn, except for Infernoid monsters, but it gives you that search if you need a specific card that you may want for your play to begin with. For some of the one-ofs for the spells, Reasoning, I would say, is one of the more important cards in the deck. This card can help just set up all the Infernoid monsters you need in your graveyard for you to use. I didn't have a Monster Gate, but I have Oil as another placeholder for our level 4 lower fire monsters with different names in our graveyard to be able to add back to your hand. But if you have Monster Gate, this is what you'll take out for the Monster Gate spot. The 1 Burial from a different dimension as another recycle option for our cards that are banished. The 1 Card Destruction for more graveyard setup as well. The 1 Call by the Grave, and the 1 for 1 is another way to grab Decatron onto the field as well, using this card. And then for some of the other numbers for the spells we run, 2 copies of Dark Fusion, just because we can summon out our Infernoid Evil using this card since it is a fiend monster, and help to protect against our opponent's card effects thanks to this card also. And then the 2 copies of Forbidden Droplet. We can clear out an Infernoid monster we have on the field, stopping an opponent's card effect, while also making room for another one to be able to summon out if we don't have Void Imagination on the field to adjust the levels of the Infernoid monsters to begin with on the field also, with the last of these spells being 2 Triple Tactics Talent as more of a draw option to use against our opponent as well, with the only trap that we run in the deck being 3 copies of Void Feast. You send 1 Void Spell Trap from your hand or face up on the field to the graveyard to special summon up to 3 Infernoid monsters from your deck whose total levels equal exactly 8, ignoring their summoning conditions, just more resources to be able to grab onto the field using this card as well. Now for the extra deck, I only have the 1 copy of Infernoid Evil. You can run 2. It definitely does help when you have the fusion options available to you in this deck to be able to summon out multiples of this card. If it's fusion summon, you can banish 1 Infernoid monster from your graveyard to send 1 Infernoid monster with different names from your deck or graveyard equal to the banished monster's level. If this card is sent to the graveyard or banished, you can add 1 void spell or trap from your deck to your hand, giving you search power as well in the form of your level 1 monster, which can also be removed from the field quite easily using some of our other link options that we run also. I also run the 1 copy of Infernoid Tiara, once again the bigger monster to summon out, using the different names to summon it out as well, depending on what we use to summon out and gain additional effects thanks to Tiara. The 1 copy of Garura, needing 2 monsters with the same type and attribute but different names, once again an easy fusion summon to make in the deck. The 1 Mud Dragon of the Swamp for the last of our fusion targets. The 1 better fusion that we run is in the form of Proxy F Magician to be able to go for some fusion summons in the deck. But before that, our other link monsters are in the form of Infernoid Flood. When your opponent would special summon a monster, quick effect, you contribute 1 monster to negate the summon and banish that monster. If a card or cards is banished from your graveyard, except during the damage step, you can banish 1 card on the field, and you need 2 or more monsters, including an Infernoid monster. So if you use cards like Void Feast to get monsters out quickly, then you can easily make your link for Infernoid Flood. The 1 Relinquish Anima, along with the 1 Almirage, the 1 Pit Knight Early, and the 1 Dual Chimera for some of the link monsters we run, with other fire supported ones being the 1 Heat of the Fire Charmer, the 1 Sunlight Wolf, the 1 IP Masquerena, and the 1 Proxy F Magician, with our other link monsters being the 1 Promethean Princess as more of a special summon option for our fire monsters, and then also the 1 Borrelsword Dragon. You don't really go into Borrelsword with Promethean Princess because you are locked into fires, so if you wanted to run the link for Whale monster, you can take out the Borrelsword. The Promethean is mostly in here just as a way to summon back Decatron onto the field to reuse again. And then as for some of the go-to plays in the deck, as I mentioned before, the big play is just setting up more and more of your Infernoid monsters in the graveyard. So just being able to reveal an Infernoid monster in your hand and discard your entire hand. If you go second against your opponent and you have, let's say, just the mishmash of cards in your hand to begin with, for your setup, you can use your Void Reignition, revealing the 1 Infernoid monster or 1 Void Spell Trap in your hand. Discard your entire hand and then draw the entire same number. So discarding 5 would be a makeshift card destruction, which you can even summon out the Decatron and then use the send effect of this card as well, setting up 1 of your bigger boss monsters in the graveyard and then being able to use the effect of Void Reignition as long as you have the other Infernoid monster to reveal, discarding the hand and then also drawing the same number of cards. So then that will come down to what you could potentially draw into using this setup as well. If you get cards like Monster Gate or Reasoning, all the better to send and set up another monster, and with more Decatrons out of the way, you then have the banish play for some of your other Infernoid monsters to then be able to summon out. And it's that setup that you can make use of and the recycle power of cards like your Void Reignition that can help just to give you more and more of a setup on the field to play into also. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed. Like I said, this is an interesting take, and the more I worked on this deck, the more I grew to love the new support that we got for the Infernoid monsters altogether. But as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.